Welcome to Policy RX with the Rock Doc. I'm Eric Murdoch, coming to you from the doctor's office in Estes Park, Colorado. Today we are talking with Tim Kang. Tim is a professional climber and coach. He started climbing at 13 years old in the Bay Area, and he just moved to Colorado, I think, last night. Tim has been crushing hard boulders and climbing routes for a long time. In the spring of 2023, he climbed 5 of the scariest highballs in the Buttermilks of California in one day. In the summer of 2023, I reached out to Tim to join me in Washington, D.C., and we're going to talk a little bit about that trip. Welcome to Policy RX, Tim. Thanks for coming.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a true honor. It's a nice looking doctor's office you have there too.
Well, let's get into it. So after you sent those incredible, that had that incredible day in the Buttermilks, I realized I want that guy coming with me to Washington, D.C. You've got the grit and tenacity that's going to take to save climbing in America. And I reached out to you, I think in the late summer, early fall of 2023, when Access Fund was working with Black Diamond to sort of assemble a crack team of professional climbers to help us work on some legislation and push back on some administrative policies that we'll go into. And the first question I have for you is, why did you accept, the call to DC? What made you decide to go to Washington, DC with the Black Diamond Access Fund team?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a couple of layers to this answer, I guess. But and thanks for the intro. I guess first and foremost, I always kind of grew up appreciating some level of, doing some work beyond just the interest that I have. And it was clear to me, I think, at a younger age. When I was in high school, I was part of a club called Students for Haiti Solidarity. Our school was working with a group in Haiti. I got to go actually at the end of high school with the trip. It was a very similar trip where they had been going for, my history teacher had been going for 10 or 11 years to work on opening a school there. That was a free school for over 1,000 students. And they had been working through lots of governmental issues that were going on there. There was a coup during that time. And so it was rough going there, but he managed to take a bunch of students every year. And the year I went was the year the school finished. So it was a very pivotal moment for them. It was moving. And I kind of grew up with other instances that just made me appreciate it. I did a lot of protests with them, but I never really dug into it myself as much. I didn't really understand exactly what we were protesting all the time. So I was like, okay, that was a chapter. And I was climbing through all that. And then, by the time, actually when I was younger, even scooting back before that, we used to watch all these real rocks, like kind of live together. All the gyms would go to the local theater and we'd watch the real rock showings. And always there were these really cool ads, and the Access Fund ads were always really cool. And I think I started to donate some money that I didn't really have much a long time ago to the Access Fund. I always thought that was such a cool idea. And I grew up mostly in California in the Bay Area, and we would climb in some areas that were saying, supported by the Access Fund, or like this area. I'm like, oh, that's actually really cool. Like I didn't really think about it in that way. So I was like, okay, so climbing, clearly isn't just like we go out and just climb on random stuff. It's actually has to be managed, or you reached out to me. I looked a little bit more into the particular issue that we were trying to work with, and realizing there was another side of this battle, if you can call it that. And just started to think a little bit more. Even during that time when I went, I still didn't understand all the nuances. And I think I asked you, I was like, how much do I have to know? Even for this podcast, it's like, oh, you don't actually know much. So then that kind of also put it into my head where it's like, okay, I understand. I'm a pawn of a bigger battle, not in a bad way, but I was like, I kind of want to see what this is about, because pawns are important figures, even if they're not as knowledgeable in this case or as impactful or so I thought. I still was like, okay, I'll play along. I'll see what's up. And it feels nice for once to actually feel like I can help out with something. If that's what it is. It was a very quick trip. It was very quick prep for. I didn't even have a suit. And you're like, you got to get, something to look nice. I was like, I didn't understand who we were going to talk to. And so from before going, I think before I really went, it was really just like kind of following up with things that I was okay doing when I was younger. And then going into it, I was like, oh, okay, this is a little bit more meaningful. And then when I was actually there, I got a lot more interested. And the group was just very serious. It was clear that this was a long lasting, it had been coming for a while. these trips, and lots of work had been going into this. So I took it a little bit differently to heart, and I learned a lot. But at the end of the day, it was an ask. I didn't know what I was exactly agreeing to. I almost didn't, and the real truthful reason why I decided to go was a lot of athletes were asked to go, and not a lot of athletes said yes. And I thought it was very interesting that, not to throw shade in any way, but I was by far the youngest person there, and I'm 26 now, and I found that to me very disappointing. Um, Also at myself because I just didn't understand very much at a young age, and I know for a fact that not that many people in my generation or my age know almost anything about what's going on. And it's just like climbing routes outside; you just take them for granted, and you don't realize that somebody worked their butt off to put the bolts up there, and it's the same thing going on here. So it's I guess it's some due diligence as I'm getting older and appreciating what I actually have, you know.
So for that particular trip in November of 2023, the mission was pretty clear for us, and we were going to talk with a bunch of legislators, congressional members about trying to support the Protecting America's Rock Climbing Act, which eventually became law and saved tens of thousands of climbing routes in 28 states in the wilderness. But we also were planning to meet with the administration, the leadership of the Park Service and the Forest Service, because we knew that they were about to drop some policy. And we obviously didn't see that policy until after the meeting. And I remember very well hanging out with you in the basement of the main interior building in DC when we opened up the policy. And that was after the meeting we had with the Forest Service and the Park Service. And I can only imagine what it was like for you to be thrown into that situation. But what was, I want you to tell that story of sort of like what it was like for you and what you saw through your eyes meeting with these lawmakers, meeting with these administrators, and did it feel at the time like this was an incredibly important moment in the history of sort of climbing policy and the trajectory of how climbing was going to be allowed or not allowed in the United States?
Yeah, I mean, I wish after the trip, I had like wished somebody had made a highlights or something of Eric just like madman running around and corralling everybody and sending people places and organizing all this stuff because we had a pretty large group of people. We did have a lot of serious athletes there, and it was really cool for me to meet a lot of these people I looked up to growing up, and then working with them on this, this cause that we were, all agreeing with. And I guess I hear a lot of stories in some of our downtime, but it was hectic. We came in again. I didn't know what was going on until the morning of. I don't know how many meetings we did that day, but I don't know, we must have done like 15 meetings over 2 days or something, and then like barely made our flight. Yeah, I think we got to the airport and I had like 40 minutes to board or to fly off, and you were like, it's gonna be fine. So it was a super. It felt like a long trip, and then when it was done, it was like it went by super quickly. But yeah, we had to organize different groups of people for slightly different reasons. Different congressional members, or just different people we were talking to had different interests that they served. So maybe it seemed fitting to have different groups. So we were jumping around, and I was kind of working with different groups of people to again essentially share a message with them that we care about this, you should care about this, and we would love you to sign and support what we have. And it felt like we won going into it. I was pretty sure it would be difficult. I don't think that many people, I didn't think that many people would care about climbing if you spoke about it in a sort of way. To me, that was very fair. We care about climbing. We don't. We just we love to go outdoors and stuff. And it's like we're in DC, man. Like we're jumping. We went to all of the biggest buildings you can see in DC, and that also was very cool. And we're talking to the biggest people who organize law, and that's what they care about, is what I thought. Yeah, anytime we opened our mouths about climbing, it felt like whoever we were talking to just was so sincerely listening and paying attention. And that kind of makes you adjust how you're sharing your story, right? Because at first you're like, oh, I got to sell this person. And it's like, oh, this person's already sold, because I guess it's interesting to, maybe in their perspective, I realize that they're helping for a cause that is generally good. And it's not so much like winning or losing. They're just like, oh, there's an issue here. And it really felt like we won almost, if not every single little battle that we had. And that was really, yeah, it was a snowball effect. And then I think the biggest meetings were at the end, and we had a meeting with, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was the head of BLM. I'm not sure what her full title was, but we had a pretty serious meeting. Uh, and I think this was at the Department of Interior. We had some serious check-in stuff. It was kind of surreal, right? I mean, it was like real security checks, and then we go up this crazy elevator in this crazy building, and we sit down in this extremely serious atmosphere to have this meeting. And that meeting in particular was really the only meeting that I had more of a speaking part than many of the other meetings. I was kind of giving a little bit of support, testimonial. I was younger, like everybody else had some pretty spectacular climbing stories. We had like mountain guides and people who had like 40 years of experience out there. And I was like, yeah, I compete in rock climbing and I like highballing and stuff. Like, they don't know what that is. But the story that I had shared in this meeting, I don't know, I didn't think about this story or this perspective to share until, I don't know, I kind of just felt like sharing a perspective that young people need to be able to experience this. All of the stories that you're hearing from all of these people who've been experiencing this for a long time is something we would love to be able to do. It has taught me, I'm a coach, I've taught other people, and it's incredibly important for me to be able to share, a balanced atmosphere in the world and share what we have. And this person was just like, just just glued looking at me, and I was like, oh my God, like, do I keep going? And yeah, afterward I could tell that that story meant something to her, and that felt good. That felt like, for me, that was a win, and I was like, wow, that was so much more meaningful to me than I thought I would. I thought it was enough, honestly, just to sit there and be like, I'm another one of these guys, like, and just, yeah, to have a real speaking part just kind of threw me for a loop. But it was really fun, but also it was very meaningful.
Yeah, I remember that meeting with the director of the BLM and how well it went, and it was actually an inspirational moment. But to go back to what you were saying about being young, that's exactly why I wanted you to be along. I think it's the Access Fund's responsibility to not just bring Tommy Caldwell and Alex Honnold, but to bring the next generation of climbers and make sure that we're prepping the next generation, because protecting access, it's never finished. And I'm really glad that you got to experience that. When the bill finally passed into law, at the end of 2024, when we actually created the Protecting America's Rock Climbing Act, and it was a huge moment for the climbing community. Were you following along? Because I didn't check in with you. Lots of things were happening, and I actually feel bad that I didn't call up every person that was part of it. But did you follow along, and did you feel like you had some part of this incredible achievement? Because you did.
In some way, yeah. I didn't necessarily follow it along. I think I clicked on some links. I did see it posted. So yeah, it felt like a kind of circle closing, which was awesome, and it felt awesome. But in some way, I also know that access is always a ongoing battle. So it felt like a major win in a long term fight, where yeah, it feels like groups are always gonna fight access because of their interests, and it's to some degree in their perspective fair, right? Like there's only so much land out there, and they need it for what they need it for, and why should they care? So that fight's always going to be really difficult, and so. And I think I just felt a lot of confidence in this group that we have in learning, looking out for our freedom and rights for climbing. You and Jason, they were just incredibly knowledgeable, experienced people. I learned a lot from hearing you guys just speak and share and lead, and just knowing that you guys were leading that charge for me was enough to be like, okay, anytime they call, I'm down to help, but otherwise, like, I'll just keep my eyes out for what's going on, because I'm sure there's going to be another one of these things. I had a lot going on in my life that I wasn't paying attention to much, so other than just reading it, I got to see that.
Well, you did a great job when you were in DC, and I could tell you had sort of an aptitude for this. And, I know you're a frequent contributor to the Test Piece podcast, where you kind of deconstruct climbing and totally geek out on the nuances of climbing. And I'm wondering if you see sort of a similarity, or if that's what attracted you to the real strategic advocacy that was going on in DC, you know, you really like to dive into how can you climb better? What are issues related to the grades, climbing grades? How can people push their limits and fulfill their goals? And I really like the way you think about all these things. And I'm wondering if there's some similarity between how you approach hard climbing, these wild achievements, mental and physical achievements that you've accomplished, especially with the highballing. If you see any relationship between the two things.
That's a good, yeah, that's an interesting observation. I think if you know any other parts of my life, it's very consistent. I find very little interest in many things until something is very complicated and there is a logical path to something, and not only a logical path to finding things make sense, but then also something with a lot of stake and and execution is required. And that just forces you as a human to coordinate lots of things, whether it be training, whether it be learning, whether it be coordinating a team or, physically executing something, I think is truly an essence of what we are supposed to do as humans. So in that context, yeah, in hindsight, I love that part of it. And I think moving forward, I feel like I just scratched the iceberg of what this world of policy is and advocacy work. And I hope it's not over. I think in the last couple of years, or in the last like 2 years, it would have been hard to get me. But moving forward, I think I would love to contribute any more that I can. And yeah, kind of connecting that to the other stuff that I really enjoy doing. Yeah, it's kind of what I said. I think there's we had a small conversation before where there's different layers of stakes that exist in climbing, and for me, it's a careful line to cross because as somebody who is maybe somewhat documented on this stuff, I never want to share in some sort of way to really promote what I do. I don't think it's especially responsible. I have hard conversations with my mom. I have hard conversations with my friends. But at the end of the day, it's what speaks to me, and it's something that is uh, an incredibly valuable perspective and tons of lessons to try to explore for myself. It's kind of a morbid perspective, but I'd rather live a shorter life that I've just explored and tried. If it gets there, really try to look for it, and if it costs, then so be it. But hopefully it doesn't. And I can look back at this book that I've lived and just be psyched that I tried to explore more. So this, yeah, feels like an unexpected chapter in my book of life, but there is definitely a parallel that I just want, if I'm going to participate, and for me, participation does mean a lot of effort. So, and you'll see me in this kind of opposite way. I might put basically no effort into things, and that's because if I want to participate, I have to put in 100%. It's really 100 to 0, and they all have to have the same kind of lines of cost, impact, experience, lessons, and yeah, I don't mind it. It's always an epic, and I hope to do that stuff forever.
So you just moved to Colorado, basically today. You got any plans? We're gonna wrap this up. I want to hear about what you got planned for the future. If you got anything,
We're gonna go bouldering. Yeah, we're going bouldering up in Rocky together, right?
That's your plan to go climbing with me?
I did plan to reach out and go climbing with you, but I'm going to rifle this weekend with my buddy. The access to hard climbing here is just absolutely insane. I grew up mostly building training for climbing competitions. I competed basically until age out of youth, until I did my highball thing in 23. And then since then, I didn't really compete. I tore my LCL actually shortly after that DC trip. So I didn't even climb for like almost a year. I got a job, don't have that job anymore. So it feels like I have to revisit parts of my resume. And a big part of my resume I didn't really push was a lot of hard outdoor climbing. So I'm really psyched to do that. I've got one more big highball project that I really want to do, which is going to take an absurd amount of training, I'm sure. And I want to compete again. So the gym access here is also really good. So some people are probably throwing up at me saying that, but I love the gyms, and I think the gyms here are awesome. So I'm going to climb in the gyms a lot, climb outside, hopefully more, and try to just get more exposure and build myself back up into the scene.
Tim, thanks so much for joining us on Policy RX and giving us your insights and stories about your experience in Washington, D.C. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to share these things. I hope everyone enjoyed this episode, and we will see you next time on Policy RX. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Eric.